Hello everyone. Okay, so in the previous video we have created the simple example that is get employees. Okay, so if I just try to refresh here, if I just go to the samples, okay, so under the tables, okay, you can see the table here, right? So under something called programmability, if you expand the programmability here, we have something called stored procedure, and whatever the stored procedure you are creating, okay, you can just access that stored procedure from here. That is sp get employees. Okay, this is what the stored procedure we have created, right? Now what we'll do is now let's create a store procedure with the parameters. Okay, so of course, like in other programming languages, when we are creating the functions, even will pass the parameters as arguments, right? So similarly, so if we want to create a store procedure with the parameters, we can just do it. Okay, so let's create a store procedure with a parameter. So I'll just know we know how to create a store procedure, right? So with the create keyword, right? Create, so I'll just use uh, procedure. Okay, so here I'll just start with the sp. So this time we'll get employees and with the department. Okay, so employees I and department. Okay, so here we know like it starts with the s as begin, right? And assume like I want to select name, gender, along with department. Department uh, from table employee, right? Okay, so if I just try to execute this cell, okay, so you can see like I'm getting the data, right? So here, for example, I want to pass the parameters, that is gender and the department. So to pass the parameter, so go after creating the create statement. Okay, so we'll pass a parameter with this sign. Okay, so at the rate, so I'll be taking a parameter for gender, okay, of n worker of 20. Okay, so I'll add one more parameter, that is department. Okay, so department id which of integer data type. Okay, these are the two department parameters. Okay, so here from where, okay, so I'll put the condition here. So where, okay, so where gender, where the gender will take the parameter what I'm passing, that is at gender. Okay, so and department, um, department id should be equal to at department id. Okay, so let's end this. Okay, so we are just putting the condition, so whatever the user is passing the parameter, so take from that and that gender and that department id. Okay, so if I just try to execute this, let's end this. Okay, let's end this. Okay, so if I just try to execute this, um department id. Okay, so department, it's id. Okay, I made the mistake here. So let's try to execute this. So I want name, gender, department id from table employee where gender is line 7 and 6, department id. Okay, so while creating what I've just given, it's just department, sorry. And here also department. Okay, so if I just try to run this, okay, so command is executed. So because I've just given a department, not id. Okay, so it's department id actually. Okay, Okay, so I've just created stored procedure. If I just try to refresh, okay, so if I just go to samples programmatically, okay, so here if I just check the stored procedure, you can see like we have created one more stored procedure. Okay, so if I just call, so we know how to call this, right? So if I'm just calling by just name, because this is with the parameters, right? So if I'm not passing the parameters, I'll just call by its name, like employees and department. Department. Okay, so if I just try to execute this, sp get employees and department. Okay, so if I just call this, okay, you can see, so I'm getting an error, that is procedure or functions. Okay, get employees department parameter gender, which is not supplied. So basically it's telling, so okay, fine. Okay, so here, okay, so basically it's telling, so we are not providing the what the parameters. Okay, so now let's pass the parameters. Okay, so sp, I'll just copy this. Okay, so here I'll just pass mail. Okay, and department one, department ID is one. I want all the query, sorry, all the data. I want the data where the gender is male and department ID is one. Okay, so I hope you understood this, right? So we are creating a store procedure called sp get employees and department. So we are selecting the name, gender, and department from the employee name. Okay, so we are just giving the conditions, whatever the user is giving. So I'm passing the parameter, right? So you can see I'm passing the parameter male. So I'm just so whatever the gender here, so I'm getting from the user, right? So and whatever the department is, I'm just getting from the user, right? So that is what the parameter here is. So I'm for this passing, you can see I'm getting a result. Okay, so where the gender is male and department ID is one. Okay, so even two. Okay, if I want to execute this, okay, so you can see this is what the two here is. Okay, so department is one. I want female employees. Let's see. Okay, female employees, if I just try to execute this, you can see like we don't have any. Okay, so let's check for the three. Okay, so we have only one. Okay, so this is how we can just pass the parameters. Assume like so if I just check for the male also, so we're getting the values, right? The male and department ID is one. Okay, so let's try to execute here. So we're getting the values. Fine. So now, so for example, if I just try to switch the parameters, like, okay, switch in the sense, like if I just try to give one here and male here. Okay, so we can see, so while creating, so we know we have said that the gender is of character data type and the department is ID, right? So if sorry, integer data type. So if I just try to execute this, we'll get an error stating that so we can't convert the data type to the integer, right? So we are getting the error. Okay, so we can just solve this. Okay, so by passing this way. Okay, so if we can see that the whatever the department, so I can just mention that department, so department is equal to one. Okay, and gender is equal to male. Okay, so I can just pass in this manner. Fine. First try to execute this. Okay, so when I execute, you can get, I'm getting the values. Okay, so this is the different ways how we can just call the store procedure by passing the parameters.